Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another episode of Achieving Perfection. This is going to be for the Great Tournament and the Dream Crafting node. So this is going to be for the white, blue, black node. Now I'm going to be doing this a little bit differently this time, so please let me know what you think. But I've got my Puzzle Quest screen here on the left, and then I've got the screen with all of the objectives and stuff here on the right. So I'm going to be able to go over both of them simultaneously, and I'm going to change the order of things a little bit. So I'm going to show off the decks first, and then I'm going to get into deck building, and then I'll explain why I chose the decks that I chose to showcase. So let's get right into it. For newer players, I would go ahead and use something like this one right here, this Liliana deck. And for players who have basically everything, and this time you really do need to have basically everything for my deck, you would want to use something like this. All right, let's go into the node itself. So for this particular node, Dream Crafting, we need to win the fight. We need to have 20 or more cards in our opponent's graveyard at the end of the fight, and we need to cast 3 or more artifact supports during the fight. The permanent support here is actually really helpful. So it's going to make it so that whenever a support you control that is an artifact or an enchantment gains shields, you do 2 things. You destroy the top 4 cards of each player's library, and then the first creature card in your hand is going to gain 3 mana. This support is particularly useful because this millstone objective can be pretty difficult to achieve. And so having this support do what it does to mill both players' libraries is really going to help us out there. So let's get into deck building. The first thing that I would do is, honestly, I would look to see if I had Karn. So before you even look at your cards, look at Karn. So if you have Karn and you've got Karn fully leveled up, take a look at this major construct token. So I'm going to read the relevant point, which is if you control 2 or more supports, a support you control gains 2 shields. So with the permanent support out here in Dream Crafting, whenever a support you control with artifact or enchantment gains shields, you get to mill the top 4 cards of each player's library. So just by using Karn's third ability, which only costs 12 loyalty, you can go ahead and mill 4 cards from your opponent every turn. So in 5 turns, you've gone ahead and completed that mill 20. And then all you really have to worry about is casting artifact supports. Now, if you don't have Karn, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go into your cards. You're going to want to go ahead and limit to the sets that are allowed. And it's the current standard. If you're watching this at a later date, just whatever the current standard is. At the time that I'm making this video, it's going to be the Ravnica sets, the War of the Spark, M20, Eldraine itself, and Origins. And the first thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and just type in Destroy Library, right? So when you type in Destroy Library, it's going to show you all of your cards that have an ability to destroy cards from someone's library. And this is particularly useful because it's going to help you find what you have at your disposal to achieve that millstone objective. Now there's a few that I really want to point out here. The first one is Eye Collector. This is an uncommon, so hopefully many of you have it, and it's going to make it so that whenever it deals combat damage, you destroy the top 4 cards of each player's library. So as long as you attack 5 times with Eye Collector, you've completed the millstone objective. And as it's only a 2/2, you don't have to worry about it killing your opponent too quickly. Some other cards to look out for on this node that are a little bit easy to get, we've got Sage's Row Denizen. So this one's pretty nice because if you run it in, say, like a Jace Unraveler of Secrets deck, so if you're going Pauper or you just don't have any of the Mythic Masterpiece cards that really make this node tick, whenever another blue creature enters the battlefield under your control, destroy the top 3 cards from each player's library. So if you've got this dude, and then you just run a bunch of other blue creatures, as you play those creatures, you're going to mill your opponent, and that's going to help you get to that 20 or more cards in the graveyard pretty quickly. There's also another common from Eldraine. It is an adventure card, and the spell portion only costs 4 mana. It's going to destroy the top 8 cards of your opponent's library, and the creature is a 0/6 with Defender. So once again, if you're using Jace Unraveler of Secrets, you can use the first side to mill out your opponent, and then the second side, especially with Jace's third ability, to create a really large wall. So that's going to be pretty useful to you. So go ahead, go through your cards and see what you have that mills things out. If you're lucky, maybe you'll have Folio of Fancies at your disposal. It's an artifact that also is going to go ahead and mill cards. So this is going to help you complete both objectives, which is pretty cool. But for the most part, if you've got Folio, maybe you have some of the other cards that I'm going to be highlighting, and so you'll see why I like those a little bit better. Now, this is just the first way of looking at it. The second thing you're going to want to do is then go ahead and look for support. So make sure that you toggle that support and just type in shield, right? So when you type in shield, what this is going to do is it's going to show you all of your supports that get bonus effects with shields. So this one's pretty nice. Everyone has it, ideally, because it's from the story. So if you've played the story for the Vanguards, you've got Kiora. And Kiora's -2 is a non-Vanguard support you control gains 2 shields. So you just spam this -2 ability and it's going to start milling your opponent out with the support. So it can be a pretty useful one. I'm personally going to be using Midnight Clock. So as this one has 3 activated blue gems and it converts gems to blue, it's going to get reinforced. And so reinforcements are also going to count toward this here permanent support gaining shields. So it's going to be milling out my opponent really quickly. Midnight Clock with other blue gem activation triggers really quickly. So this will be a really quick and easy way. And it's an artifact. So it's helping me achieve both objectives. You could use the Magic Mirror. I don't like it so much because of how much mana it costs, but it reinforces itself every turn, which is kind of cool. And from the common standpoint, I really like Manifold Key, and you'll see that I'm using it in my suggested deck, and it's got Activate 3, another artifact support you control, gains 1 shield. The second portion, pointless. But this is really nice, especially with Sword of the Animist that's going to destroy sections of gems. It'll make the activations really easy, and then you boost up your supports with their shields, and you go ahead and destroy a bunch of cards in the library. It also counts as an artifact itself, so it'll be easy to cast at only 6 mana, and will help with both objectives. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and type in Reinforce. So you're going to still want to make sure that you've got the support toggled over here. It was right over there. Oh well, here, filters. In your filter, you still want to make sure you've got this support toggled so that when you go ahead and check them out, you're seeing things that are just supports. So I'm also going to be personally using Bloodletter Quill because it's an artifact that automatically reinforces itself every turn and it draws cards. So it's going to be doing 2 things for me. It'll also actually help me play my creatures too, but that's a different story entirely. But if you have cards like this, that's going to really help you out because it's going to help you achieve both objectives. A few other cards that will do that. Now this is getting kind of nasty, I know. It's really Masterpiece heavy that's going to be achieving both. Plague Boiler is going to do that. So with the activations, it reinforces itself. It is an artifact itself. You've got Blast Zone. So this one with activations is going to be gaining shields. Just make sure you don't reinforce it unless you want to blow everything up. So don't blow up your own side. That's bad news bears. Fire Mines Research is another one that reinforces itself pretty easily. Same with Thousand Year Storm for that matter, and Rakdos Right Knife. So you've got a lot of options at your disposal. I'd really run 1, maybe 2 of these. I'm personally going to be running 2. So like I said, the 2 that I'm running are going to be Bloodletter Quill and Midnight Clock. So those are the ones that at the time of my making this video, I think are the best. And so as long as you have those taken care of, so that's going to help you with all of that mill part of the objective, you should honestly be fine for the rest of this. The last thing that you're going to want to do is go ahead, check and see what artifacts you have. So you're going to want to check and see. No, come on, don't be silly. Artifacts. Oh, I said artifacts plural. I should have just said artifacts singular. Teehee. So see what artifacts you have within your colors and fill out the rest of your artifacts so that you can guaranteed make both portions of your objective. Now let's get into the decks that I made, and so why would I use the ones that I chose, right? So for this, let's start with the Liliana deck, and then let's move over to the Karn deck. So Liliana, this is really for much newer players because ideally you were able to pick yourself up Karn in the Planeswalker sale, but if you weren't, don't worry about it. This is going to be fine. So we've got Eye Collector. Eye Collector is going to be milling every time it attacks, which is great. We've got the Manifold Key combo with Sword of the Animist. If you don't have Sword of the Animist, that's fine. It is an artifact and it does destroy gems, but if you don't have this, that's fine. It's a rare from Origins, so ideally you do, but if you don't, I understand. Don't worry. You can use just the Manifold Key with some other artifact also. I'm throwing Heraldic Banner in here because it's an artifact that can go ahead and convert gems for us, which I really like, especially because it helps to synergize with this Sword of the Animist. I like having as much synergy in my decks as possible. For removal, I threw in Death Sprout. This is my removal of choice card in Standard. I love it. It kills something and it gives us a land. That land it's going to give us is Witch's Cottage, which is nice because you're probably going to be losing some creatures yourself on this node. And also, as you're destroying the top 4 cards of each player's library, you're going to be having creatures in your graveyard, and the Witch's Cottage is going to get them back. Status is really important if you're running a mono black deck, namely for the flip side statute, which is going to destroy artifacts and enchantments. This is huge because as this node requires the use of artifacts, you will probably see some really nasty artifacts here. So having status statute is really nice. Statue. Just to go ahead and get rid of those pesky supports. Black doesn't have a lot of support removal. Angrath's Rampage. This will save your bacon against nasty vanguards. Oathsworn Knight. This is just a strong creature that has quite a bit of power. It can go ahead, wipe out other creatures. You can use other creatures if you want, but I like these. If you have stronger creatures at your disposal, swap these out. The creatures here, Ugin's Conjurant and Oathsworn Knight, are the least important parts of the deck. The rest of it is like the actual important stuff. So that's why I'd go ahead and use this one. You'll have very decent control. You'll achieve both of your objectives pretty easily. The artifacts themselves don't cost too much mana. You've got decent gem conversion. You've got decent removal. So at that point, you've really just got to wait out your opponent and kill them. So this is my suggestion for newer players. Now, if you have Karn, absolutely use Karn. The deck that I will be using is very... Thank you so much, Creative Cloud. That I will be using is very masterpiece heavy, I know, so it's going to be a lot harder for newer players to make, and by that I mean it's like impossible. But let's go ahead and go over the choices that I'm going to be making for this. So the first one is Urza. Urza's token here is an artifact. So as we get stacks of Urza out, that support is going to reinforce and mill things. It doesn't count as casting a support, but with all of that gem conversion, especially with Karn, we should be able to fetch all of the things we need. Bloodletter Quill, this one is going to be drawing us cards, it's going to be reinforcing itself, so it's going to be completing both of these objectives here, and ideally it's going to help us find more artifacts to cast. We like that. Midnight Clock, I've already gone over, is amazing. It's going to be converting to blue, just like Urza, and it's going to help me draw cards, it's going to reinforce itself, it's beautiful. Castle Vantress is going to be converting to blue, it's going to be drawing more cards, so it's just going to keep the cards coming. This will be a very stable deck. Very, very stable. Golos is in here to help fetch the lands, which is good, or really just the Vantress. And then with the Activate, it's going to be fetching even more things. So that should be helping to reinforce our artifacts. And in reinforcing our artifacts, it's going to be milling out the opponent. For removal, I've thrown in Death Sprout, which I love, and Casualties of War because it destroys some of everything. So this makes me feel pretty safe. Serum Powder is in here in part for the overflow, because with the overflow, teeny little things. It's when this card enters your hand, so if you use Karn's first ability, you can just use the first, get Serum Powder, and then discard all your cards without mana, and then draw that many cards, which is pretty cool. Also, it's an artifact, it's a cheap artifact, so I can play it, and it's going to count toward that Foundry objective. I'll move my mouse away. Court of Calling is here to help me pull Urzas. I want as many Urzas as possible, just so I can get as much gem conversion as possible, so I can play everything. And finally, we're converting the world to blue, so Finale of Revelation is amazing. So it's going to draw us cards, it's going to give them half their mana. And so really, I've been testing this deck a lot in the training grounds, and I achieve both of those objectives in pretending that perma support exists really, really quickly. So these are the decks that I would suggest as your deck building. Just remember, use all of those tips that I showed off, and ideally you should be fine. Make sure that you have gem conversion, make sure that you have removal, make sure you've got your artifacts, and best of luck. I'll see you in the next one.